House in Baltimore. Basketball, all Terps fans' eyes on Orlando. We've talked so much about the Terps, but I do not want to miss out on the other things that are going on. And certainly a guy here who knows a little bit about the ACC. We might see Florida State before the weekend's over. An old friend, when Maryland parts from the ACC, we stop calling guys like Aaron Beard, who's the AP sports writer down in the Carolinas covering UNC, State, Duke, Wake Forest, but primarily the Tar Heels there in Chapel Hill. We welcome Aaron Beard back onto the program. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at AaronBeardAP. His work also appears at WNST.net as part of our college basketball coverage through the AP. Aaron, what's going on? Nothing at all in the ACC. Nothing's changed except Maryland's gone. Now these other teams are going to slot in as 1 and 2 seeds, right?
There you go. And only 9 teams getting in for a record haul for the ACC. Nothing much going on down this way.
Well, it's a basketball conference. We all knew that when we left. We'll get to the angst between Maryland and the ACC, but more importantly, what are the prospects? And we've covered the Big Ten all week long. We're trying to say, well, is any team going to be alive next week in the Big Ten? How many teams can survive to the 16? Certainly no one thinks any of the Big Ten teams are going to be in the Final Four. The ACC might have 2 or 3 teams. At least that's what they're hoping down there on Tobacco Road, right?
Yeah, and in the bracket, it's kind of interesting. Duke is in one bracket, North Carolina's in one bracket, Louisville's in one bracket, and then Florida State and Notre Dame are in the other. So it's conceivable. The odds are obviously against it, but you could have, there are good enough teams spread out through the bracket that they could all make a deep run and end up playing each other down the line. If you think about it, last year, the ACC had a record 6 teams in the Sweet 16, had 4 in the Elite 8, and then 2 in the Final Four. And the reason was because Syracuse beat Virginia and North Carolina beat Notre Dame in the regional finals. So the ACC ended up taking some of its own teams out late in the tournament. That's how good they were last year. And set a tournament record for wins by a conference.
Well, they try to set it up traditionally so that you don't eat your own, right? And obviously, getting to the quarters or to the semis, that's going to happen. But when you put 9 teams in, there's only 4 brackets.
Right.
At some point they're going to see each other.
Yeah, there's only so many places to put them. And to your point about the West region, Florida State and Notre Dame are the 3 and the 5 in that region, and they could end up playing in San Jose in the regional final. And that's not the worst thing. We've seen conference matchups show up earlier, but you're right. 9 teams, 4 brackets, that's an average of, more than 2 per bracket.
2 point something. I've done the math.
there you go. So.
Well, for you with Carolina, let's start there and start with Duke. And by the way, many of the Maryland fans, when we lost on Friday night, we're thinking, well, probably going to be a 7 seed, maybe an 8 seed. Might be seeing North Carolina Duke this weekend because that would be what the basketball gods might want to see. Instead, we see Florida State. As a Maryland fan, if Maryland can get through Xavier and let's say Florida State gets through FGCU, Maryland manages to avoid the big boys, but you're going to be traveling around with the big boys down there in Greenville. I know Carolina has great thoughts of being at the Final Four in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I did a story this week about how the shot for Villanova, Chris Jenkins' shot, still hovers over 2 teams that are 1 seeds. Villanova wants to be the first repeat champion since Florida. North Carolina wants to get back and sort of come up with one more play that they didn't have last year. So North Carolina, there was aspirations from the start of the year because of the experience, because they did have, some pretty good talent coming back. There was a discussion the longer they thrive down here were they better than last year? And my thought was absolutely not. You can't lose Bryce Johnson, an All-American, and Marcus Page, a 4-year starter, and be better. But they're very good just the same. And so they've talked about it a lot this year, particularly Joel Berry, about the idea of think about it all the time, the shot, and how it is a motivation. And here they are, a 1 seed for the record 16th time.
Well, and I would say for these programs, the reloading part has not stopped with Maryland leaving. Maryland has found some success now in the Big Ten, and even that's been questioned, coming in as a 6 seed and sort of going into the swoon at the end. But, Carolina and Duke, when they graduate players, it doesn't seem to think, they won't be in the top 10 or they won't be a top seed next year. Duke's pissed when they're a 2 seed, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, too, they've kind of gone about it different ways. In Duke's case, Coach K has kind of adopted somewhat of a Kentucky-like model, maybe Kentucky light, if you will, because they are going after the one-and-done guys. You had Brandon Ingram, Jaleel Okafor, and Justice Winslow.
I remember when you wouldn't get your name up on the banner, he wouldn't let you in there if he didn't think you were there for 48 months, right?
Yeah. So, but now, that's part of what you incorporate in. But then, when Duke won the national title in 2015, you had Quinn Cook, a guy at the point. You had Emil Jefferson, who's still there now in the middle for Duke. That you had experience, and it wasn't quite the same thing as Kentucky with the huge roster turnover one year to the next on the one and dones. In North Carolina's case, they have kind of struck out on some of these one and dones. They've recruited a lot of them. And what they've had now is a group that's largely been together for 3 and 4 years. A senior class in Kennedy Meeks and Isaiah Hicks, a junior class of Theo Pinson, Justin Jackson, Joel Berry. That's a group that's been together and has kind of matured together. And last year was sort of the moment that group went from maturing and taking a huge leap. And some of that, too, comes in because, the program has been under the shadow of the NCAA investigation. It does impact recruiting in some level. But, again, when you get the right guys in, you develop them together, and maybe your Hall of Fame coach can coach a little bit. You can be here with a 1 seed for the second straight year.
Well, you say it's affected their recruiting, really?
Some. Sure. I mean, and it's not that they are not getting, like we said, they haven't gotten these A-list one-and-done kids, if you will. But
sure.
They are getting good kids. But, it does affect them, sure. And
good enough to be a 1 seed. What more do you want? I mean, there's no zero.
Right. Again, but some of these kids are ones that, especially the core group, are ones who committed and stuck with them early on when the whole academic thing was a little bit earlier in the process. And they've been there through that time and matured together as a team. It's been the subsequent classes that have been a little trickier. Again, it's not like they can't recruit. It's just, it is a factor in what they do. And you compare that to Duke where, they bring them in, big names, they're attractive school, and they get them in there, but they also mix them with guys like Emil Jefferson, and Matt Jones is another guy who is a veteran player who does a lot of things that help you win if you're Duke.
Well, and it is interesting to watch Krzyzewski navigate this far into his career. No offense to Roy, but, Kay's been there from the beginning, going back to Dean Smith and all of that. How much longer for him? I mean, what mountains are left to climb here, especially given, well-documented health issues, right?
Well, he talks like someone who continually feels charged by what he's doing. And this is somewhat true of Roy Williams, too. These are coaches who are incredibly competitive people who are driven by these moments. And Roy Williams has talked about, 5 to 9 more years is kind of his thing. And maybe it isn't that long. Maybe you say some of that for recruiting. But the point being, it doesn't appear to be an imminent thought of everyone saying, oh, this may be it. Because these coaches seem like, they're at the top of their game. They are making adjustments. They're winning games. They're bringing in good recruits. It's not like watching a guy who's past his prime trying to swing at 95-mile-an-hour fastballs at the plate, and it's it's clearly past their time. This is not what's happening here, and so the urgency for someone to say, well, at what point do you need to call it a career? I mean, you're a 1 seed, and the other one's a 2 seed with an ACC tournament title.
We are on the line with Aaron Beard of the Associated Press down there in the Carolinas, covering all things Tar Heels, a little bit of Duke. He'll be in Greenville all weekend, trapped down there right near the Gaffney Peach, as I remember it, off of 85, and making the journey with Duke and Carolina. Duke and Villanova in a potential final in New York. That's kind of delicious, right? And, no offense to North Carolina and potentially Kentucky and Memphis, but there is something about Duke getting the tougher draw here and having to see Villanova earlier, as you pointed out last year. Villanova went through everybody last year in the ACC.
Yeah, you think about Villanova's run to the title. They certainly earned it because they beat a Miami team who was really good, veteran group. Then they beat Kansas, who was a 1 seed, and then they killed Oklahoma with Buddy Hield, and then they beat North Carolina, who was probably the best team overall. And that's a heck of a 4-game run. So you tip your hat in that situation to a team that does, that's not one of those things where the bracket cleared out for them. No, it didn't. And in Duke's case, the idea of, New York, Villanova, Duke playing the preseason number 1 Duke, looking a little bit more like the Duke people expected, like maybe they had kind of figured some things out. They'd gotten healthier. it's the kind of matchup that gets everybody's eyes, wide open and eager. But, to your point, you've got to navigate these brackets. I mean, for Villanova at the top half, Virginia, if, assuming they get past UNC Wilmington, they play a style that defends you and makes it tough for you to score. And they gave Villanova fits, took a last-second tip in for Villanova to beat Virginia at home this year. And then Florida, the team that's won plenty of games in the SEC. So,
they haven't given Villanova an easy path. There's no doubt about that, right?
No, and it's a minefield. And you look at, and the same thing with Duke, the 3 seed in Duke's the bottom half of the bracket is Baylor, a team that got to number 1 in the country and won the battle for Atlantis by coming from 20 down to beat Louisville. So, that it's going to be an interesting bracket there. When you mentioned the North Carolina bracket, the thing that makes it the most interesting for me is the fact that Kentucky's second-round game could be a Wichita State team that is 8th in Ken Palm's rankings, as a 10 seed, by the way. And then their Sweet 16 game could be UCLA. I mean, and believe me, that's the kind of ticket people would want to pay for, a Kentucky-UCLA game in the Sweet 16.
Aaron Beard joining us here from the AP. You can follow his journey at WNST.net as well. I wanted to point that out. A lot of his work shows up there based on the back of our stats package and our AP package as well at WNST.net. Florida State, I know you've seen them a couple times this year. We haven't seen much of the ACC around here. We're kind of busy with the Big Ten network these days, watching the Indianas and the Michigan States and all that stuff. The notion that Maryland would see an ACC team, not a shocker. There's really not a whole lot of history between Florida State and Maryland. My history is usually with the football team coming up here kicking the snot out of us every other year. But in the case of Florida State, some size there, and that, for any Maryland fan, if they can survive Xavier on Thursday night, and that's under question based on how they played the last month, Florida State waiting for them. A lot of people thought Florida State was a top 10 team all year long, right?
Yeah, and they went through a stretch, and this was the thing that stands out for them this year, where they played 6 straight games against ranked opponents in league play. They went 5-1. The only game they lost was at North Carolina during that stretch. So clearly they have been tested. Anybody who played in the ACC was, but they had a particularly brutal stretch. Now, then they turned around and lost some games immediately after that. I think after that stretch, they lost at Georgia Tech. They lost at Syracuse.
They lost at Notre Dame, Pittsburgh. Yeah, they lost to some places they shouldn't have lost, right?
But those games were all on the road. It wasn't, so you're going like they lost at Duke by 5. I mean, you're talking about they went into some tough places and played. I mean, they are very deep, because if you look at their stats, they've got like 4 guys averaging 25 or more minutes, another 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 6 more guys averaging at least 10. So they've got good athletes and they're deep. And, plus they've got the ability to score. Jonathan Isaac in particular, that's a freshman that he's 6'10", he's long, he averages about 12 a game, 8 rebounds, but he can really affect any matchup just because of his size and length. I mean, they're a fun team to watch. This is not a team that just tries to defend you and just, be really physical with you. They can score, too.
You mentioned Louisville, and we haven't talked much about them at all, and certainly their side of the draw. It could have easily been Louisville and Duke's spot, or Duke and Louisville's spot to avoid Villanova or Kansas, but Louisville's coming from a bracket where they might see a torrid Michigan team here at this point to see how they're going to fare heading into this weekend. Certainly last weekend they were pretty decent. And then Oregon on the other side, that's no easy draw for them on the other side of the Midwest bracket.
No, it isn't. And Louisville, it's kind of interesting when you watch the way Louisville plays. They defend. They've got Donovan Mitchell who can provide some scoring. They've got the coaching with Rick Pitino. But one thing that's shown up a couple times this year now is the free throw problem. They were really bad at Carolina when they lost in Chapel Hill, and Pitino was after that game like, hey, you can't shoot like this. And then it's crept up again in some games. They struggled to stop Wake Forest. Late in the year, a Wake Forest team hosted them the last week of the regular season, where Wake needs a win to help their NCAA tournament resume. They don't have a marquee win, and they beat Louisville 88-81. They score 88 points on Louisville's defense. So, Louisville's actually lost 3 of their last 5 if you go back to the North Carolina game, and lost to Duke in the first round of the ACC or the second round of the ACC tournament. So, but they can defend. They can be physical. They've got length. And then Oregon, I guess the question is Boucher's injury, with the shot blocking. I don't know how that affects them, but you're talking about a team there that went to the Elite Eight last year and really got on a roll. and in the Pac-12, and actually really hammered an Arizona team that's a number 2 seed in this tournament.
I'm going to throw something at you because it takes getting out of the ACC to get sort of this sort of intel and thought. Thought around the Big Ten and from Maryland's perspective, especially on the basketball side, but even the football side, is that the Big Ten's friendly sort of kind of to each other, that it's been a very friendly welcome for Maryland. And I know even when Maryland was in the ACC, it always felt like there was some animosity and, the sisters running 2 different programs across Tobacco Road and Krzyzewski and Gary and the fans and all of that stuff. Is Maryland missed in the ACC, or has it just been literally a blip? Because it definitely feels like there's some bad blood toward Maryland for having departed and sort of taken the money and run, to borrow the Steve Miller Band song.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are purists, I guess, or traditionalists that do, because again, from a lot, it's weird to see, let's say, Maryland and Virginia sitting right there, and they're playing like whatever teams, they're nearby, and then Maryland's playing ACC teams in the Big Ten Challenge. North Carolina and Maryland playing in the 2016 season, for example. It's still odd, I think, for a lot of people who have been around the ACC for a long time to still look at it, even though it's been a couple of years now. But
we'd like to see more of those. As fans, we're excited about the chance. This is a nice opportunity to win and have a chance to play an ACC team. That seems to mean something around here. I don't know if it means anything on the other side, for sure.
I have not heard, when people are talking about bracket stuff, a lot about, oh man, Maryland may end up playing an ACC team. Like, to your point, that may be something that's more in your area that, for the people that are right around Maryland, they're like, hey, this would be great. But in the ACC, they turned around and added Louisville in Maryland's position, and Louisville's a heck of a program in its own right. So, it's hard to say. I think the biggest thing is just, people were stunned when Maryland left. I think it caught everybody off guard. There was disappointment from the people that have seen Maryland be around the ACC for a long time. But, I think there's also the idea of, this is college sports now with realignment. And it wasn't the first realignment that had changed. It was maybe one of the most recent. But you think about it, we had already had, the Syracuse and Pitt announcements, and we had already seen Boston College and Virginia Tech to the ACC before.
Yeah, I remember when Miami came in and it was a big deal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm old. Think about it. So you think about it, and Florida State was Florida State in 92, I think, was the first major one that I can remember of that group. But you start thinking about it, it's like now people kind of look at it and are like, well, it is what it is. Before it was like, oh my goodness, somebody left the league or moved around. I think people now are just kind of accustomed to the idea of some of these conference memberships are not permanent anymore.
Yeah, change happens in all facets of life.
There you go.
Aaron Beard is here. He is Aaron Beard AP out on Twitter. Is that a Butler dog there you have a picture of on your Twitter there? I thought it was your dog, then I saw the B on it.
No, that is Butler Blue. Butler was in Raleigh for the NCAA tournament last year, but could not get in the arena because the NCAA does not allow live mascots on the floor until the Final Four. So when Butler was in Raleigh, they brought Blue to the arena to do a meet and greet with the fans around and like a tailgate. And my photographer and I went over there to sort of document the event. And I am a dog lover, so I had to make sure to get a picture with Blue.
He looks like a lovely canine, he does. Sports writer at the Associated Press. He's covering the ACC for the AP, and he'll be down in Greenville, and you can follow his work at WNST.net. Aaron, always great visiting with you, man. We don't cross paths as much anymore, but I may track you down after this Florida State thing. We'll see if we fear the turtle or whether the turtle will be playing golf next week.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Great having you on. Aaron Beard, AP is the way to follow him out at the Associated Press. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We also are going to be breaking that news as it comes to you, as we've done with the Ravens free agency all week long. Luke's hard at work on that. We got opening day coming up, World Baseball Classic. If there's breaking news, it happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday, getting you ready for a weekend of hoops, hoops and more hoops. I'll be watching the Caps this weekend as well as the World Baseball Classic, and we're always monitoring the NFL free agency and getting ready for our London trip. If you want to go to London, toss us an email. Go to the Road Trips tab. New information now up at WNST.net on our trip and pricing. So throw us a note. We'd love to take you with us to London. We're also doing Green Bay, Nashville, Oakland, and Minnesota. That happens next month. Reminder, Monday night, head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Caps joins us at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Mare Registry for There Goes My Hero. For all you puckheads out there, come join us for a night of hockey. I know it's been tough times for the Caps last week in California, but looking to right the ship. I am Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.